Hi, my name's Shane. I use they and them pronouns, and this is Impossible Landscapes. This is the first session of our Delta Green Impossible Landscapes campaign. It's been organised through the Open Hearth gaming community. You can find out more about the Open Hearth gaming community through the link in the notes underneath this video. We have already talked about safety tools. We've already set up all of that stuff. The players have all just created their characters, and we're about to introduce them and hear about them. So, Puckett, I'm going to hand over to you. You're going to introduce yourself and your character.
Well, hello, my name is Puckett. I use he, him pronouns. I'll be playing Sarah Bradford, who uses she, her pronouns. Sarah is a 23-year-old, well, I would say college dropout, but that's not even remotely accurate. That's just what her parents tell people who don't know the whole sordid story. She tried to pay her way through Harvard by forging art and was doing a pretty good job of it. But, being a Mayflower Bradford, that tends to kind of reflect poorly on the family, and so she's at odds with her parents, but is quite happy about that, and is kind of just gone straight ahead and continued her forging career to whatever extent she can, picking up a number of arguably useful skills along the way.
So tell us, tell us a bit about her bonds, I guess, in particular, her connections.
So she has four connections. The people she's closest to at this point are Albert Mitchell, who is a chemical supplier. And as any good forger knows, you have to be very good at mixing your paints to actually make it seem like they are paints from the era that you're forging. So he comes in, he's very useful. He comes in very handy. There's Alton Standish, her fence. He's a similarly black sheeped member of his family, being one of the Mayflower Standishes. But because of that, they seem to get along. They have kind of a joking camaraderie between them, even though he's substantially older. There's Katie Sampson, her best friend forever slash girlfriend slash I don't know. It's complicated. And then there's Merrick Broadstone, who is a crooked art dealer who is more than happy to sell the lesser masterworks that Sarah paints because it's a whole lot easier to sell them since most of them are in private collections and often the collections of people who don't want it known that they actually own them.
Mm. So I guess like the way bonds work in this game is that they're relationships that are powerful and important enough to you that you can sort of draw on the strength of those relationships to see you through hard times. I guess, it's kind of clear to me from what you said why Elton and Katie would fill that role, but less clear what makes Albert and Merrick like emotionally important to you.
I mean, Merrick makes me money. He's somebody that I call when I'm broke, and he calls me when he needs something to draw some people into his gallery. Uh, I'm reasonably sure that he would take a bullet for me. I'm not so sure I would take a bullet for him because there's always got to be another crooked art dealer around, but he only has one of me. And
Okay.
as for Mitchell, well, he's just this old guy who's kind of taken me under his wing. He knows that I have an interest in chemistry, although I don't quite tell him why I have that interest in chemistry. But he has the damnedest experience and knowledge with chemicals. And when I run into a problem, like a really thorny conundrum about how to formulate a paint, I can go to him and I can ask him some questions. And it's like I'm talking to somebody who did a couple of PhDs in chemistry, like OChem. It's the guy has knows more about chemicals than pretty much anyone else I've ever talked to, and he's only too happy to share his knowledge. I mean, part of it's probably because not many people go in there and talk to him, and he
Mhm.
doesn't seem to have much of a family. So I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of a surrogate daughter to him.
Nice. And tell us about your involvement with Delta Green. Like, how recently were you recruited? Is this, how have you been on assignment for them before, that sort of thing.
I think I've been, in the parlance of the game, a friendly. I'm somebody who's enough on the outs with society that, if I turned up dead, people would make some tut tuts about it, and oh, that's so sad. She was so young, but it wouldn't really surprise a lot of people because I do run around with criminals. Um, so I think I've just been called in here and there on a consulting basis because of the. I had to study history. My parents just would not allow me not to because, oh God, we're a Mayflower Brantford. Okay, whatever. But because of that, I stumbled across a lot of interesting things about the world as it existed before the Mayflower. And some of those things are occult related, and I have some expertise in them. And, every once in a while, it seems kind of silly, but apparently Delta Green needs a forger. Go figure.
Makes sense. Cool. That all sounds awesome. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about Sarah at this point?
While I have not passed the bar, nor do I intend to. I am far more than a jailhouse lawyer. And while I am not a criminologist, nor do I intend to be, I know a significant amount about the criminal mind. And when it comes to forging, particularly paintings, don't try me.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Brandon, can you introduce yourself and Tara?
Oh, sure. I'm Brandon. My character is Tara Reinhardt. Who is a firefighter paramedic for the Massachusetts General Hospital. Although, it's often is enough other hospitals in the Boston area because of the nature of paramedic services. And she likes both ends of that. She likes being called, to take care of medical emergencies, and she likes being called with big fire buildings and such like that. In college, she was, a Title IX athlete. This is before, 1995 is before, women's soccer and such like that got big. But it was still a thing, but it was a thing in college relatively newly. And so she was kind of a jock, and then didn't know what she wanted to do for a little while, and then she gravitated into firefighting, and went back and got specialized training to be a paramedic. She's an extroverted physical person, and likes the machinery aspect, working with the fire engines and hook and ladders and things like that just as well. But what she really likes is going heavy gear and going into smoky places that are on fire. She is, and she never encountered anything that really frightened her. I mean, and she's, climbing into tall buildings and things like that. She has zero fear of heights. She never found anything that really frightened her until relatively recently, when she was going in to burning apartment building because looking for some people that they thought were still in there. And she saw someone burst into flame in front of her. And some sort of thing basically, suddenly vanish. And she reported what she saw. It was, just dismissed as okay. This, people do rapidly combust sometime if they're, under certain circumstances, but she doesn't think so. And evidently this something in this got to Delta Green, and they came and recruited her. You know, from an external standpoint or something like that, it was something like a fire vampire, or something like that. That was killing like people, and that had started this fire in this building. And so she didn't see enough to to have lost permanent sanity at this point, but it was still deeply unsettling. And her motivations are save those who can be saved and prove I'm not afraid of much.
Nice.
But she likes the chance to rush into really dangerous situations. That's why, and so I think in part of that there's a little bit of adrenaline thrill, and why she went into her particular profession. Firefighting, involves a lot of sitting around and waiting, right? But then, but every so often, when things are a really crashing disaster, you need someone to go in full oxygen equipment and try to search, a smoke-filled wreckage to see if there's anybody in there who's still alive and could be got out. And she loves that part of the job.
And tell us about her bonds.
So she is friendly with one of the other people in her unit, Jen Havermeyer, who's a firefighter EMT. And they have known each other for several years. The only family she has in Boston is her brother, who's Oliver Reinhardt, who is an automobile mechanic. And she also stays in touch and sometimes gets together with Lillian Guilford, who was her coach when she was back in college.
Cool. That all sounds awesome. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about Tara?
Let's see. She knows a little bit about medicine because she has always entertained the idea of at one point going to medical school to become a doctor, but the money and time never really became available, especially the money.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself and Yelena?
Yes, hello. My name is Mark. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. And I will be playing Yelena Anisimov. Her pronouns are she, her. Yelena is a former KGB officer, well, maybe not an officer, KGB employee. She is an anthropologist, has a PhD in sociocultural anthropology, and she was recruited by the KGB during the Cold War to find, her and a group of other academics and scholars to come up with strategies outside of simple like military or economic pressure to contribute to the fall of the West and capitalism. She eventually became disaffected by how the Soviet Union was sort of implementing this, as she's kind of a true, I wouldn't say necessarily a true believer of communism, but believes it enough to as an ideal that she understood that the way it was being implemented during that time period was not true to what it stood for. So I decided to defect to the West. And I think during her time with the KGB, they had been doing experiments to, probe other realities, other existences and stuff, as every government did during the time, I'm sure. And so she was part of teams that kind of researched what they found there, the people that they found in these other places, using her expertise as an anthropologist. And so on her defection, Delta Green was very much interested from the get-go, to see if they could recruit her into the agency as well.
So what does her life look like now? Because she must have been in America for what, like at least 5 years or so. So she
Yeah.
presumably has put down some
So
roots.
yeah, absolutely. She was she was placed with a host family, sort of a typical nuclear American family. 2 adults, 2.5 kids, that sort of thing. The Smith family, which is one of her bonds, actually, who she has actually, I think, developed a close relationship with the kids, particularly. I'm going to say ages 13 and 10. So she stays in their basement. I think she's probably still there. 5 years is, even though the Soviet Union has fallen by this point, I still think there's some bad blood out there against her. So this is part of her safety, to stay with this family. So I think she's working with Delta Green, and mostly living a typical suburbanite American lifestyle otherwise.
Oh. And tell us about your other bonds.
Yeah, so we have Agent Kepler, who is her CIA handler, the one who helped her get out of the Soviet Union and into the States. I'd say that their relationship is mostly professional, though there's some like personal, as they had to work really close together, obviously, and had to stay in a safe house right at the beginning, after she defected, together for quite some time. So that sort of professional personal boundary isn't exactly that strong or that solid. So there's definitely some fuzziness around that. And they're obviously still in contact, even though she's now transitioned to be a Delta Green agent. And then her other close bond is her therapist, Dr. Davis, who she sees, I think, bi-weekly, to sort of parse out not only having to live in a new culture, and sort of adjust to that, but also to deal with what she has seen and what she participated in during her time with the KGB. And I would hazard to guess that Dr. Davis is assigned by Delta Green and is probably a Delta Green agent himself.
Oh. So, I mean, typically Delta Green agents have some sort of a day job, and are just occasionally called up for Delta Green assignments. Is that true for Elena, or is she directly employed by the program?
I think at this point, she's probably, it's been 5 years, that long enough. I think maybe, yeah, I think she has a day job. I think she's a barista. Starbucks is the thing at this point, right? 1995? I think so.
Surely.
Yeah. Or, whatever non-copyrighted coffee shop.
I think we can safely assume that our YouTube channel will not be sued by Starbucks.
So probably a Starbucks barista, just something that gives flexibility and not a lot of commitment.
How does she feel about that? Like, given she has pretty impressive credentials.
She hates it. This is obviously not what she wants to be doing. She would rather be working in academia as she's used to.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
the almighty dollar rules, so she needs to make some money.
Yeah, I guess that's what you get for defecting to the West. Cool. Is there anything else you want to tell us about Yelena?
I think that pretty much covers it.
All right, cool. So Blake, can I get you to introduce yourself and Felix?
G'day, I'm Blake, he, him. I'm playing Felix Straussman, aka Flicker, he, him. He's a science nerd all his life. He's a physicist, focused on like LiDAR projects for the military and anything to do with visible light spectrum or even the invisible light spectrum. He's 30, grew up in Boston, lives in a triple-decker family home. Dad was, one of his bonds is his dad, who was a Air Force radio signals sort of specialist for 40 years. Also taught him judo. He's a science nerd. If he's talking about science, he's an extrovert. Otherwise, he's an introvert. Other bonds. He's Catherine is I don't know. Do you call them deans over there? They're like the head of the science facility for that section of the university at MIT. She's like the mother he never had because his actual mother buggered off when he was 15 with a real estate agent. So he's kind of got a mum and a dad in his life, and they're his main bonds.
Is it just the two bonds?
Yeah, I couldn't think of anything else, but I'm sure something will pop in my head.
All right, so
so
presumably you have more bonds that you'll fill out as we go, because
you're
not going to want to like shortchange yourself on bonds.
Okay.
Cool.
How many do you get for your profession?
How many what? Sorry.
How many bonds do you get for your profession?
4.
There's a couple more. That's cool. It's fine to fill those in as we go. So tell us about how you got involved with Delta Green.
Some sort of visual anomaly where like light wasn't refracting properly or whatever. And they're like, hey, we need a specialist to sort of come in and look at this. And I was already working on LiDAR military projects, so I was kind of already on their radar, their books anyway. And I got involved and gave them my expertise of this is what I think is happening. It shouldn't be happening, but I can prove it is. We can see what's happening. And and I got tied into other projects with similar, visual gravity light-based anomalies and went from there.
Okay, cool. Is there anything else you want to tell us about Felix?
Nope. That's about it.
Fair enough. So we're coming up to the hour. If it's okay with everyone, I'd like us to take our break just a bit later so we can finish up character stuff and then come back to play. But if anyone needs a break now, we can do that. Are people okay if we just roll through a little bit longer? Cool. So if you look in the Google Drive folder, there's a document called Delta Green Relationship Questions. The intention here is that each of you will ask 2 of these questions to the table. They all, sort of ask one of the other players to volunteer to have a particular connection to you, because the 4 of you presumably have worked together before. It doesn't seem like any of you are brand new to Delta Green. So we're establishing a bit about your relationships. You can figure out the details now. We can talk them through, or we can just get the establish the relationship and work out the details in play. So Puckett, can I get you to go first and just ask one of these questions?
All righty. Okay, just because I want to turn this into absolute mess. Who has a crush on me that they're keeping under wraps?
I think Yelena.
All right.
Nice.
Do we want to expand on this or just?
That's a good question.
Is it
What
like
was-
she who she wants to be, or is it just physical attraction, or?
I think because Yelena is like an academic at heart, that there's an aspect of the like dangerous that she's attracted to, but also is like there's a pretty like concerning age gap here, so maybe we should reconsider.
How old is Yelena?
35,
35, 23.
like more than a decade.
I mean, like I said, I love mess, so I am totally okay with that if you are. But it's going to end up messier than a normal relationship between people who are closer together in age would, because of that age gap. And not just because of that, but because of the cultural gaps and a bunch of other reasons.
I mean, there's no reason to assume that just because there's a one-way crush, or at least a one-way crush, that anything is actually going to happen.
That's true.
Yeah, and Yelena's, certainly seems like the type to keep this to herself, right? Because she has kept so much to
100%.
herself.
Yeah, she must be good with secrets.
I would think so.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, if that doesn't bother anybody else, then all for it.
Okay with it?
All right. So we'll go left to right, everyone doing one question, and then we'll go back right to left. So Brandon, can I get you to ask one of the relationship questions?
Sure. Who do I feel like I need to look out for?
Possibly me, because I'm a geeky scientist.
Did I really stuff you in a locker?
Yeah, if you want.
I mean, I think we've both grown up a bit since.
If you didn't beat me up, you saw me get beaten up, and I've still got no muscle tone.
Maybe I got you out of a locker.
Yeah.
The jocks were shoving you in a locker, and I went over there and fended them off because they weren't good, because they weren't going to hit a girl.
That's a sweet, like sibling style connection. I like it.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
That would absolutely have made things worse for Felix.
Mark, do you want to ask one of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like, who did I make a terrible first impression on?
Hang on, and you'll.
If you want, I'll volunteer for that one.
Might be better to spread them around, but
yeah. I'm just saying, it's an option.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
fine with whomever.
I'd take it too. You just have to decide what is the impression.
That's a good question. Let me take a look at. Because the way I'm thinking is because Yelena is pretty. The way I'm thinking is how much do people in the cell trust Yelena, being a former Soviet agent, even if it was just on the non-combat side or whatever you would want to call it, if that is relevant to your character.
Of course, right. Of course, Sarah is the most suspicious person here.
Yeah, but also the only motivation that I have written down right now is pissing off my parents even more than I already have. So becoming friends with a KGB defector, that might actually be fun. So
Right.
Maybe you didn't make a terrible impression on me.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, we don't have to define exactly what the bad first impression was. Like, we can fill that out during play, or just let it hang that, you did make a bad first impression, and maybe you need to make that up. Maybe you don't.
Okay. Works for me.
All right. So, Blake, I'm going to get you to ask 2 of these questions, and then we'll work back across the keeper.
Okay. Oh, this could be interesting. Who took a bullet for me, literally or metaphorically? Like, maybe they were going to kick me out of Delta Green, and they said, no, he's useful or something. Or maybe some cultist got some psychotropic drugs and started shooting a gun around or something.
I'll take it. Do you want it to be literal or metaphoric?
It's up to you. What inspires you, I guess.
Yeah, I don't. So, have you ever mixed it up anything with Delta Green, or have you been? Do you think your involvement's been pretty academic up to this point?
I mean, he has done judo and stuff, so he's got an armed combat of 60, so he's not totally useless.
No. I'm not saying. I'm just saying in terms of your history. Do you think?
Mostly academic, I think.
He's
not a first responder in any way.
So I think metaphorically,
but he does have keen senses. He might have been on like a stakeout or something, and he may have responded to something, and then you went shit, duck out of the way, bullet.
Yeah, I think I think you ended up you were on a stakeout, and you somebody basically came to your window with a weapon, and you ran for it, and they might have got you, except that I ran them over because it was like, because we realized, it's like you were like, oh, there's something going on, something like that. And I went shit and got in a car and got there just in time to hit the fellow with the car. And I kind of wrapped it around a telephone pole, and there was some explaining to do. But the fellow with the knife was not troubling me anymore.
No, all right.
Nice.
And you want me to answer the second question?
Yes, please.
Well, in the spirit of making a mess, who has a crush on me that they're keeping under wraps?
Oh, wait, sorry, Pocket already asked that one. Can I get you to?
Okay,
choose
yep.
We haven't had yet.
Who do I need to prove myself to?
I'll volunteer for that one.
Could you never see me do anything useful, or you're used to
because you're an academic. Like, what can you do that's useful in the real world? Like, we take you out of your lab. What can you do?
Fair enough.
Nice. All right. Mark, one more question.
Yeah, I think I like this one because it just gives a little bit of flavor. Like, who do I most enjoy bickering with?
I think it's me.
Okay. What are you thinking? Why
What
do we pick her?
Why do we pick her?
Yeah.
Because I like arguing. So I'm happy to I've taken positions on subjects that I do not have.
Right.
That you find out afterwards. It's like, wait, you're not Republican. And it's like,
right.
no, but it was funny.
And I think then Yelena, probably due to both like language differences and personality differences, takes it seriously. So doesn't even like, even though she enjoys the back and forth.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's that like, wait, you really believe that? Like, no.
No.
And then we'll go on like diatribes.
Tara's a little pugnacious. Her response to being challenged is to fight back, mostly with words.
Nice. All right, Brandon, one more question for you.
Who's seen me at my worst?
I'll throw up my hand.
I think at my worst was it was probably drunk off my ass. I drink.
Why were you drunk?
Prove it to. I think to prove a point. In other words, it was like, I can drink you under the table kind of thing. And I don't back down from that kind of thing very well. I drink recreationally fairly hard. And usually I can control it, but you have seen me tanked off my ass a couple of times when it was foolish to do so.
Nice.
Certainly anything that reminds me of that particular fire is likely to have some morose drinking in it too. So maybe I talked about that. I don't exactly remember what I said. I told you.
Oh, and Pucker, one last question.
Just because I love mess and nobody else asked it, who have I hooked up with at least once?
I was going to volunteer, but like you were probably his first, so it's probably awkward as shit. He's not good with women.
That could be funny though.
Well, it probably was for you, but
yeah, but it's like it could be one of those things where you're terrible at talking to women, but then once you get past needing to talk about anything, it's okay. But then eventually you need to talk again, and then that
it goes downhill.
Yeah. So basically, it's only bad whenever you talk.
Getting close to home.
So you were able to prove yourself in one realm, maybe.
And do you think that this is a one-time thing? Do you think it happened a couple of times? Do you think it's semi-ongoing?
I think it's up to you because he wouldn't initiate it. He wouldn't know what to do.
Okay.
I mean, what I would say about that is like, presumably you mostly only meet, at least mostly only meet up when you're on assignment for Delta Greens. There are long stretches when you probably don't see each other. So
Yep.
maybe it's something that will emerge during play, whether that's ongoing or is something in the past that colors their relationship now.
Got it.
All right, so that is character creation. We're not going to get a whole lot of play in today, but let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back and just do a little bit of scene setting, and then we'll finish up. Is that good for everyone?
Works for me.
Cool.
Yep.
So what we're going to start with is that each of you, wherever you are, going about your daily life, is going to get summoned to a meeting with Agent Marsha, your case officer, at Washington Square Park in New York for 4:45 p.m. on the 10th of August, 1995. So those messages come to you in whatever sort of coded or covert form. You recognize them and you know that the way these things works is you've got to go. There's no being late for a Delta Green assignment. So what I want is to start with just a sort of short vignette or scene from each of you that tells us, like, shows us your everyday life, what's happening when you get that invitation, and tell us about, like, what's the most inconvenient thing for you personally about needing to leave on short notice. So we'll go left to right across the keeper. So Puckett, what does it look like for Sarah?
So I'm actually at Albert's place. We're sitting in his office. He's broken out some decent bourbon, and we're just having a laugh because I showed up with some wildly esoteric chemistry question, like what kind of chemicals were in Dutch oil paints that were in use in, say, 1587, and he was looking it up in various reference books and things that he has, because he's come to expect questions like that from me over the time I've known him. And my pager goes off. And I see that it spells out using only numbers, opera, and a phone number. And I know pretty much what that means. So I call in and I get the information, and I'm going to have to delay a painting that I had promised to, Merrick for, a few days from now. So that's non-ideal. He'll be pissed, but what's he gonna do? Replace me?
All right, cool. Thank you. Brandon, what does it look like for Tara? Brandon, you're muted.
She's sitting at the firehouse like you do. And she's working on a crossword puzzle. And then, periodically flinging it down in disgust and picking up a magazine that she's already read twice. A call comes over the dispatch, and she says, Reinhardt, you've got a personal call. And she goes over, she figures it's her brother. And she picks up the phone, and it's is this Tara Reinhardt? Yes, she says there's this is so and so from the Poison Control Center. And we have that, we have information on that report that you asked for. And she hears the whole thing out, and her code name is Poison. And there's enough enough things dropped into this that she knows that this is not a regular message. And she says, so, could you just, could you call, such and such number at your first convenience? And she makes a few answers and hangs up the phone. And she says, I got to go down to a hospital and fill out paperwork. Evidently, tox came back positive on one of our pickups, and they need to know some information about the environment. And this is a thing. So I'll just hey, Jen, can you cover me the rest of the day? And Jen goes, sure, it's things are quiet. Although I'm sure they'll blow up the moment you step out the door. Yeah, I say. And I get into my car and leave.
Cool. What does it look like for Yelena?
I think Yelena is working, and anytime she gets a call while she's working, it's always a different customer, but the person orders the exact same order with the name is Mantle, which is her code name. So a person will come in and order this very particular, specific kind of drink. The kinds that most baristas hate to make because it's so particular. But then, with the name Mantle left, and so every time this happens, Yelena goes to her supervisor and says, "We got this very particular order, and we need this. We need something like a special thing that I have to talk to her about, or the supervisor about at the time." And no matter who is the supervisor on during that shift, they always let her go with no repercussions. So that's how, when Yelena's at work anyway, that she gets calls.
A secret conspiracy between Delta Green and Starbucks. So what's inconvenient for Yelena about needing to leave suddenly?
They're short staffed, and it's, even though she always gets bad marks on her performance review for this stuff, but they never fire her. But she's occasionally gotten a dock in pay or other sort of employee setbacks.
Cool. And Blake, what does it look like for Felix?
I think he's in a meeting with Catherine, science dean at MIT, and they're chatting away, and he's got a pager, old school beeper thing, and so, and he's nodding along and listening, but he keeps sort of looking at it, and she's like, "All right, we'll talk later. Just go." So he quickly goes out the door and he looks and because basically they gave him this pager. They're the only ones that call on the damn thing. And it just says refraction, then the address or whatever. So he's kind of half running down the corridors and figuring out the quickest way to get to New York. A couple of students are like, "Oh, Professor, I need to talk to you about an extension." He's like, 3 days, doesn't even look at them.
Nice. All right. So, look, I sort of hate to do this, but I think it makes sense that we actually wrap up here for this week. I don't want to get halfway through giving your assignment and having to stop. I think it'll just flow better if we wait. So, are people okay if I post this recording online?
Yep,
Post away.
All right. I'm going to end the recording here.